Welcome to today's video, where we'll explore a more powerful strategy than the usual no-contact approach. A method that helps you heal and transforms you into someone untouchable and emotionally independent. If you've ever been in a relationship that ended unexpectedly, leaving you feeling broken, confused, or emotionally drained, this video is for you. We'll dive deep into how emotional mastery and self-discipline can help you get over the past and evolve beyond it. You might be familiar with no contact, but what if I told you there's a way to take it a step further, creating a transformation that doesn't just make your ex regret leaving, but makes them wish they could come back to a version of you they can no longer reach? Stick with me until the end of this video as we uncover the power of emotional indifference, self-mastery, and how to reclaim control of your life without relying on anyone's validation. Let's begin this journey to becoming the most potent version of yourself. When love is shattered, it feels as though the world itself crumbles. A man in this predicament, left heartbroken after a swift and detached breakup, can hardly comprehend the sudden shift in the relationship. The love they once shared seemed profound and unbreakable, yet she withdrew with alarming speed, leaving him to question everything. As he reflects on the moments they spent together, he tries to piece together the puzzle of what went wrong, but all he is left with is confusion, self-doubt, and a lingering sense of betrayal. Her emotional detachment, which seems almost instantaneous, cuts more profoundly than the breakup. It is not just the end of a relationship that stings, but the realization that she has moved on so effortlessly, while he remains stuck in the past. It is the sting of being replaced, as though he was never truly valued or loved in the first place. Each memory of their time together now feels distorted, tainted by the sharp edge of regret and unanswered questions. In his pain, he turns to the only thing he believes can salvage what's left: no contact. He hopes that by giving her space, she will miss him and return. But he doesn't understand that this tactic, while often recommended, is not a magic solution. The longer he clings to the hope that she will return, the more he loses sight of himself. Her absence in his life feels like an ache that intensifies each day. Yet there is a more profound lesson to be learned from this experience. The pain he feels is not just about her absence, but his inability to accept the impermanence of relationships. It reminds us that we cannot control others' emotions, nor dictate when or why love fades. The Stoic philosophy teaches us that our attachment to things beyond our control, like the behavior of others, is the root of suffering. Instead of holding on to what has slipped away, true healing comes from letting go and embracing the moment's reality. As he battles with his emotions, the advice from the Stoics echoes in his mind. What is beyond your control, let it go. Focus on what is in your control. In time, he will realize that the most important thing is not whether she returns, but whether he can find peace within himself. The healing process begins not with waiting for someone else to return, but with embracing his worth and moving forward. With or without her, it is a painful, yet necessary journey that will ultimately lead him to a deeper understanding of himself and love. In reality, however, many people choose a different path. They adopt no contact, a strategy often touted to forget or win back an ex. But does it work? For the most part, no contact is a temporary measure, a kind of emotional pause button, rather than a true inner transformation. Men, in particular, tend to use this method to regain a sense of control, but in reality, it is just an illusion of power. The core issue, emotional attachment, remains unresolved. The man remains in a state of waiting, hoping that his ex will return, instead of truly freeing himself from the bonds of the past. With their finely tuned emotional instincts, women can easily sense when a man is still emotionally tethered to the past. They pick up on the most minor shifts in his energy, the subtle hesitations, the way he lingers in the space between what was and what could be. No contact only succeeds when it's not a game of avoidance, but an actual step toward emotional detachment. If a man hasn't genuinely let go, his actions will betray him, no matter how long he spends in silence. The danger of no contact is the false hope it creates. A seemingly innocent check-in from an ex, perhaps a simple message or an unintentional sign of interest, can be misinterpreted as an invitation for reconnection. In reality, these small gestures mean nothing, yet they can lead to spiraling thoughts and confusion, especially if one is still emotionally invested. A temporary silence is not a cure for emotional dependency. True emotional detachment requires more than just distance. It demands a shift in mindset, a release from the expectation that someone else can fulfill your needs. It's about taking back control and moving forward without needing validation. It's a journey that requires the strength to accept that what was is gone, and what comes next is an opportunity for personal growth. A man who embraces emotional detachment can walk away from the past with peace, knowing that his sense of self-worth does not hinge on someone else's return. It's not about playing games, but about finding inner strength and clarity. That's when no contact works, not as a tactic, but as an authentic, transformative process. In this transition, the most profound step is the shift from a no-contact rule to a state of true detachment. Many believe cutting off all communication is the ultimate solution, but emotional detachment is more than physical silence. It's not simply avoiding people or not texting, but a radical release. Freeing your mind from the burden of memories of your ex, removing them from your emotional world. Emotional indifference doesn't simply mean ignoring someone's calls or texts. It's about eradicating their influence from your daily thoughts. This requires a radical shift in how you see and feel about them. When you reach this state, their presence, real or imagined, no longer holds any power over you. The absence of emotional attachment leads to freedom, a feeling of liberation that paves the way for growth and self-discovery. You stop seeking validation from them because you no longer depend on their opinion of you. This is a crucial step for anyone wanting to break free from the grip of a past relationship. The wisdom of Stoicism can be particularly insightful here. As Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been." This philosophy underscores the importance of reclaiming your emotional sovereignty. It isn't about denial or suppression, but rather about creating space between you and the emotional baggage of your past. When you detach yourself mentally and emotionally, you're no longer a prisoner of the past. You begin to see your worth, independent of anyone else's approval. What is left when emotional indifference sets in? A more potent, more resilient version of yourself emerges. No longer caught in the cycle of longing or regret, you become your source of affirmation. Your emotional energy is no longer diverted towards an ex who no longer plays a role in your life. Instead, it shifts towards self-growth and pursuing new, fulfilling connections. This state of emotional indifference isn't just for those recovering from breakups. It can be applied to any toxic or draining relationship. It's a powerful way to regain control over your emotions, ensuring that no one has the power to disrupt your peace of mind. It's about moving forward with confidence and clarity, knowing that the opinions and actions of others no longer dictate your happiness. Genuine indifference doesn't mean you forget the past or erase the good moments. You no longer let the past hold you hostage. You learn to live with the lessons it taught you without allowing it to define who you are. The more you practice this emotional detachment, the more you realize that the real power lies within you, not in anyone else's hands. This deliberate detachment, when practiced and internalized, becomes a greater force than silence. It is not the absence of words, but the complete emotional detachment that shifts the balance of power. When a person no longer clings desperately or seeks comfort from another, that is when he or she truly takes back control of his or her life. And in that moment, the ex-partner will notice the change, a dramatic transformation from someone who was once vulnerable and uncertain to someone strong, independent, and at peace. As days pass and the indifference continues, the ex feels an unfamiliar emptiness. The emotional connection they once assumed was unbreakable is now severed. This shift doesn't happen overnight, but when it does, it's palpable. The ex can no longer rely on the emotional chaos of the past. They now see someone who no longer needs them for validation or comfort. They are no longer the source of his happiness or sense of identity. This change stirs something profound within, the beginning of regret. The realization slowly sinks in that the man they once knew has evolved into someone stronger, no longer holding the past in his heart. The new version of him, grounded in his worth, stands as a quiet testament to resilience. They see a man who has discovered a sense of purpose that doesn't revolve around them, and that's when the guilt, the pangs of lost opportunity, begin to take root. The following pain is one of their own making, a consequence of having underestimated the strength to let go genuinely. In his emotional freedom, he symbolizes what they failed to appreciate. His indifference reflects the realization that, sometimes, the greatest revenge is not seeking any revenge. Instead, it is living well, untouched by the past, with a heart unburdened and a mind focused on the future. The powerful lesson here is simple. Emotional freedom is not about abandonment or disregard, but about reclaiming one's sense of worth and identity. As a man grows into this new version of himself, he finds the strength and confidence that comes with knowing he doesn't need anyone else's validation to feel complete. And in that quiet power, he creates an irreversible shift that even those who once held his heart may regret. This shift gives rise to a paradox at the heart of human attraction. We are often attracted to what we cannot have. This is especially true in relationships when the dynamics change and one partner becomes emotionally distant, leaving the other struggling with confusion and longing. When a man begins to pull away, consciously or unconsciously, he becomes an enigma. He no longer seeks validation or emotional connection, and suddenly his indifference acts as a powerful magnet. The woman who once had him within reach now craves what she thought she could control. This emotional distance isn't driven by malice or desire to hurt. It's a natural response to the realization that someone has become too available, too predictable. But when a man steps back and stops chasing, the shift is profound. Rather than pushing his partner away, his absence ignites something far more complex. The uncertainty of not knowing where he stands breeds curiosity. She doesn't miss him yet, but she begins to wonder why he no longer needs her. It's this question that spirals into doubt. What has changed? Why doesn't he seem to care anymore? Attraction shifts in subtle ways. It is no longer just a matter of desire, but of fear. The unknown begins to feel more potent than the known. The very thing that once brought comfort now leaves her uneasy. What seemed like a predictable relationship now feels like a tightrope walk with no clear end. This is when she checks in, reaching out to regain some semblance of control, but her efforts are met with indifference or worse, an unfamiliar coldness that only deepens the void between them. This shift is unsettling. It forces her to confront her vulnerability, and in doing so she experiences a regret that is sharper and more painful than anything she could have imagined. It's not the regret of missing him, it's the regret of realizing she no longer holds any sway over him. He is no longer the man she thought she could control, and the fact that he is now emotionally unrecognizable makes her long for what she once was. The question remains, how did things change so drastically? In the end, this emotional detachment creates a powerful dynamic. The man who once seemed predictable and easy to understand now becomes an elusive figure. His indifference has not only pushed her away, it has made her want him even more. Her regret isn't just about losing him, it's about realizing she no longer controls the narrative. And this loss of control is what stirs the most profound sense of longing and attraction. But it was here, in the void she could not fill, that another truth gradually emerged. In the delicate dance of relationships, it's not always the loudest voice that commands attention. It's often the quietest presence that exudes true power. A man's transformation into a figure of silent strength, undeterred by the world's need for validation, shifts the dynamics of his relationships, especially with his ex-partner. His true power emerges in his refusal to chase after praise or seek comfort in familiar patterns. His evolution is not marked by boastful claims or overt demonstrations of success, but rather by an unspoken commitment to his growth, which stands apart from any external validation. As he moves through life with purpose and poise, his ex can't help but notice the change. It's subtle yet undeniable. He no longer needs to engage with her similarly. The conversations that once carried the weight of their history are now strained and hollow. There is no longer his emotional energy that once fueled their interactions, and there is no room for the old dynamics to return. His detachment isn't out of malice, it is simply a natural consequence of his growth, a natural pull away from what no longer serves him. The result is a lingering sense of regret on her part. She remembers the man he once was, but that version of him is gone, replaced by someone who has learned to live without her. It's this absence that speaks louder than any words. As he moves forward, unencumbered by past ties, his ex finds herself revisiting the choices that led to this moment. The silent domination he now wields is not one of control, but of self-sufficiency, of choosing not to return to a dynamic that no longer serves them. There's a lesson here that transcends personal relationships. Growth requires letting go, not just of others, but of old versions of ourselves that no longer align with our purpose. True strength lies not in force, but in the quiet assurance of one's journey, the Stoics would say. By living authentically without needing approval or validation from others, we inevitably become individuals who shape the dynamics around us without lifting a finger to do so. This is the true power of detachment, the ability to move forward with dignity, leaving behind only the echoes of a past that no longer defines us. From this separation, another phenomenon arises, the attraction of the unknown. There's something undeniably magnetic about a person who remains an enigma, someone whose life seems to unfold unexpectedly. It's not about playing games or keeping secrets for the sake of drama, but rather about embracing the power of being unpredictable. When a man approaches his relationships with a deliberate aura of mystery, he doesn't have to try hard to capture attention. By staying present but unreadable, he crafts an air of intrigue that naturally draws others in, especially the ones who once thought they had him all figured out. He doesn't need to make grand gestures or constantly prove his worth. Instead, he lets his actions and words be sparse, yet impactful, like flashes of brilliance seen through the fog. In these moments, a woman might catch glimpses of the life he's building, which seems alluring and out of reach. She is left wondering about the new version of him, the version she no longer fully understands. His unpredictability becomes a silent statement. There's more to me than you know, and I'm not here to reveal it all. This mystery stands out like a beacon in a world where people constantly reveal themselves through social media and other channels. He doesn't post every moment of his day, doesn't offer up every emotion for validation, and certainly doesn't share every detail of his new life with her. He allows her to witness, but never fully comprehend. The power of this unpredictability is further amplified when it aligns with the principles of Stoicism, living with purpose, self-control, and resilience. A Stoic man understands that nothing external can define his worth. He doesn't seek validation, especially not from an ex who has seen him in his most vulnerable moments. Instead, he focuses on his growth and well-being, slowly revealing a better life not in words, but in how he lives. Every decision he makes is deliberate, guided by an inner compass that reflects his strength and clarity of mind. As a result, his ex's curiosity begins to grow. She starts to wonder about the changes she's seen in him, about the life he's creating without her. In this way, quiet respect builds. He no longer feels the need to explain himself or defend his choices. His actions speak louder than words ever could, and the mystery surrounding him only deepens her desire to understand. But the truth is, she never will. Not entirely, and that's the allure. But for him, everything has changed. There comes a moment in every man's life when he realizes that his emotional ties no longer hold the power they once did. It is a moment of liberation, an awakening, that signals the end of his dependency on validation from others, especially those who once held a special place in his heart. This is the moment he begins the process of becoming untouchable. To be untouchable is not to close oneself off from human connection, but to rise above the need for constant approval or closure. It is a conscious choice to be no longer tethered to past relationships or emotional baggage. With all its pain and attachment, the past no longer has dominion over his actions or decisions. He has shed his old self, once desperate for the comfort of closure or the soothing words of validation, and in doing so, he becomes impervious to the emotional manipulation of others. The ex, once a central figure in his life, notices the shift. She can no longer reach him the way she once could. The texts, the calls, the attempts at reigniting old sparks all fall flat. Her influence over him fades into the background as he becomes more and more impervious to her advances. It is at this moment that she realizes the extent of his growth. The emotional attachment she once relied on has dissolved, and with it, her power over him. Emotional independence frees you from the chains of past relationships, allowing you to live a life unburdened by the ghosts of former connections. It doesn't mean cutting people out completely, but protecting your emotional energy and preserving your inner peace. You stop seeking validation from external sources, knowing that someone else's perception of you does not determine your worth. In the words of the Stoics, we are reminded that what we do not control, we should not worry about. The past is no longer within your control, and neither is the behavior or feelings of others. Your strength lies in your ability to maintain your emotional equilibrium. A man who is emotionally detached in this way does not crumble in the face of rejection or disappointment, for he knows that his happiness and sense of worth come from within, not from the approval of others. This is the ultimate power, to be untouchable, not in the sense of being cold or distant, but in being fully rooted in your sense of self. When you stop seeking external validation, you become unreachable, not because you are closed off, but because you no longer depend on the approval of others to feel complete. This is the essence of emotional maturity, the freedom to live on your terms, independent of the whims and expectations of others. The key to remaining untouchable is embracing the philosophy of self-sufficiency. You must cultivate your sense of worth, know your value, and refuse to allow anyone or anything to shake it. This doesn't mean you become immune to love or affection. Instead, you no longer rely on them to validate your existence. You become the master of your emotional world, unaffected by the turbulence of external forces. In this state of emotional independence, you gain clarity. You become a man who is not swayed by every emotional storm that comes his way. You understand that feelings are fleeting, and the most important thing is to maintain your inner balance. You begin to understand the nature of relationships, not as a source of validation, but as a mutual exchange of love, respect, and understanding. As you continue on this journey, you become more and more untouchable, not because you are unreachable in the literal sense, but because you have built a life in which your sense of worth is no longer tied to anyone else's approval. You are no longer a prisoner to your emotions, nor do you allow others to hold the key to your happiness. You stand firm, rooted in yourself, which is a power no one can take away. And from that strength you understand that sometimes letting go is not a loss, but a release. In life's journey, we will encounter moments of realization that letting go is the only way to move forward. For men who have ended a relationship, the final change occurs when they fully embrace a new reality, free from the emotional shackles of the past. It is no longer about seeking validation or attention from their ex or anyone else. The man reaches a point where he no longer looks back and no longer lets the past define him. He has moved on, not out of bitterness, but because he has found his emotional independence. This independence is a quiet, unspoken power. It comes from understanding that one's worth is not dependent on the approval of others, especially not from someone who no longer plays a role in his life. The man who achieves this emotional self-sufficiency becomes a figure of quiet strength. His confidence is no longer a reflection of someone else's judgment, but a product of his internal growth. In this stage, there is no desire to rekindle what was once there. The focus is entirely on himself, his happiness, his peace. He doesn't need her acknowledgement to feel validated. This shift is subtle but profound. The ex-partner may still hold on to memories and still hope for reconciliation. Still, she starts to realize something that stings. He is lost to her, not because of a deliberate act of rejection, but because he has evolved beyond the need for her approval. In this space of self-empowerment, the past holds no sway over his present. He walks forward with the quiet assurance that his happiness does not hinge on any one person. He becomes a living testament to the Stoic idea that we do not control the actions of others, only our response to them. In this emotional clarity, the ex understands that the man she once knew is no longer the same. He has grown into something greater, something independent, and something that no longer needs her. And in that moment of realization, the ex-partner is faced with an undeniable truth. The man has moved on, not because he wanted to hurt her, but because he has realized that his worth is complete, with or without her. This is the final shift, the moment of liberation, where the man finds freedom not in revenge or resentment, but in the quiet strength of his emotional independence. In this freedom, a man's true power is revealed, not in anger or the resistance to confrontation, but in the ability to be unaffected by the shadows of the past. When a man reaches the point where old wounds no longer define him, he is truly free. This freedom lies not in the desire for revenge or making others regret their actions, but in mastering his own emotions, in evolving beyond the need for external validation. It is the moment when the inner self is no longer shackled by what others think or do. The pain that once seemed inescapable becomes a passing thought, no longer dominating his journey. A man who has achieved emotional evolution walks unshaken in the face of trials. His path is no longer interrupted by the judgment of others, for his value comes not from their approval, but from his self-awarenessness. He no longer seeks validation in relationships or others' opinions. This is the essence of true masculinity. The recognition that his worth is inherent and not based on anyone's ability to affirm it. As the Stoics have taught, the self is the only thing in life truly within one's control. The world will continue to offer challenges, but the strength to overcome them comes from the inner tranquility achieved by mastering one's mind. Living without being tied to the past means accepting that those who hurt you no longer hold power over you. The regrets and the pain that once seemed insurmountable are now stepping stones toward the man you are becoming. In every relationship and every struggle, there is a lesson that helps shape your growth. Letting go of the past is not an act of forgetting, but liberation. A choice to focus on the present and the future and not dwell on things that can no longer be changed. The true victory comes when you realize that you are enough. The man who no longer needs the approval of others to feel whole is the truly free one. This journey is not about winning a battle over someone else. It's about winning the battle over your self-doubt. It's about choosing a life of fulfillment where peace resides not in the hands of others, but in the stability of your own heart. A man who walks this path does so with the quiet confidence that nothing from his past can ever hold him back. This is the essence of strength and the freedom that only true self-mastery can bring. And it is here that a crucial turning point occurs. When a man truly understands that his life is no longer governed by the scars of past relationships or the expectations of others, he crosses a new threshold of maturity. He no longer lets his suffering shape his decisions or influence his actions. The burden of the past begins to lift, and a new clarity emerges in its place. What was once a hazy mind becomes a focused individual, guided by his values, principles, and aspirations. He discovers the power of moving forward, not as a mere survival tactic, but as an active choice to rise above. Each step taken away from the past becomes a testament to his growth, a reminder that pain, while powerful, is not permanent. He begins to see the depth of his transformation. There's an inner peace that comes with the realization that returning to the past, even if tempting at times, would mean undermining the very growth he has fought so hard to achieve. This new sense of self, free from the shackles of past emotional wounds, is his victory. It's not just about leaving someone behind. It's about embracing the version of himself that has emerged from those trials. The healing journey doesn't end with forgetting, it ends with understanding. As he moves forward, the lessons of the past no longer haunt him. They empower him. His newfound strength doesn't come from being untouched by the past, but from having learned to live with it, to acknowledge it, and to choose a better future. This perspective shapes his relationships with others and, most importantly, with himself. He realizes that true freedom comes not from avoiding pain, but from facing it head-on and allowing it to refine him. Once heavy with the past, his heart is now lightened by the wisdom he's gained. And the more he embraces this inner wisdom, the more he realizes that a life truly lived is unapologetically on his terms. In this new chapter, he no longer defines himself based on the people who left or the failed relationships he has had. He is defined by his commitment to himself, his growth, and his capacity to love freely. Without looking back, the real victory is in this evolution, where he never considers returning to what he once was. He has become someone who understands that in the end, growth is the ultimate prize, and nothing from the past holds the power to diminish his progress. To wrap things up, the journey we've discussed isn't just about getting someone to regret their actions or trying to make them come back. It's about something far more powerful: self-mastery. It's about the emotional transformation leading to true independence, becoming more substantial, resilient, and unshakable. By shifting from a state of emotional dependency to one of indifference and emotional detachment, you not only regain control over your life, but you also evolve into someone who no longer seeks validation or closure from anyone. This process doesn't just empower you to move past the relationship, it liberates you from the very idea of returning to it, because you've grown beyond it. You begin to live on your terms, focusing on your personal growth, goals, and values. And that's the real victory. Embracing a new version of yourself that is self-sufficient, emotionally grounded, and unstoppable. So, I want to hear from you. Have you experienced a similar transformation? Or do you have thoughts on this journey of emotional independence? Share your personal stories and insights in the comments below. And if you want more empowering content and strategies like this, subscribe to the channel. Together, we can continue this path of growth and self-discovery.